I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture. A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
Andrew Ryan is currently one of the most interesting video game antagonists ever. He's a twisted, greedy Walt Disney. He's a man of wealth and power and despises governments, morals, and censorship. He's an atheist, believing that he's the only one who can reach his dreams, and is willing to push others aside in order to do so. He's a man whose influence is so widespread that it strikes fear into some of the biggest criminals. But is he a god? Andrew Ryan certainly hates the idea of a god. When you first enter the lighthouse that takes you to Rapture, the underwater city that he created, the very first thing that you see is a banner that reads, "No gods or kings, only man." Andrew Ryan is an objectivist, one of the largest conversation points in BioShock. Ken Levine, the head honcho for the BioShock games, based Andrew Ryan's character off of a famous philosopher and objectivist, Ayn Rand.
So you came up with the idea of let's do this underwater, let's do this sort of isolated place. Then you had to answer the question of, why would someone build this? Is that sort of how it worked, sort of order of operations? You then had to come up with a story to explain?
Yeah, I think we wanted a very believable reason why they'd be there. Right. And sort of the necessary isolation of the place sort of led to, well, what kind of person would want to do this? And I wasn't even particularly aware of the sort of political implications of what I was reading, but I've been reading, I had read The Fountainhead. Right. By Ayn Rand, and I mostly thought it was an interesting story. Like, I didn't realize that people were sort of basing their sort of political lives around it, because I wasn't that tuned in to that stuff at that point. And so, but I love the dialogue and the kind of speechifying in it, because you can see a video game character speaking with that kind of certainty and that kind of confident philosophy. It just seemed like a natural kind of thing to apply to this place. And so it just sort of all came together as a sort of who is the guy who would do this? Well, that character.
Even their names are similar, something that Levine did on purpose. Ayn Rand was a Russian-American novelist and objectivist. In her own words, she describes objectivism as the concept of a man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute. Andrew Ryan fits this bill. He says that he wanted to escape from the governments and rules of the surface world, so he created Rapture. He went to the bottom of the ocean and achieved his goals of building a city that did not restrict man from being great. And like Ayn Rand, Andrew Ryan despises any form of mysticism or supernaturalism, including all forms of religion, hence the phrase, "no gods or kings, only man." But his actions in the game don't really reflect this belief. I think it's ingenious to observe Andrew Ryan and label him as the biggest hypocrite in Rapture. By creating plasmids, abilities that let you shoot lightning from your hands or set things on fire, and a city where there wasn't a solidified structured government like the surface world, he eventually put himself on a pedestal for the citizens of Rapture to look up to him and basically worship him. From the very beginning of the game, when you first enter the lighthouse, this hypocrisy is shown so blatantly when the first thing you see is a large bust of Andrew Ryan's face with that famous banner underneath it, as if he didn't even realize the hypocrisy when he had the statue made. Because he created Rapture as well as plasmids, he was seen as a creator. Now, I don't think anyone in the game actually refers to him as the creator, but he's definitely the man that most people think of when wondering who's in charge. He's the founder of the city and has an imposing presence, so he's probably the man in charge. In other words, he's a god, or maybe even a king. And to push this point even further, you just have to look at the name of the city, Rapture. In Christianity, the rapture refers to the end-time event when all Christians will rise into the sky to join Christ for eternity. It signals a new beginning in a new world. And, well, Rapture was created to escape from the surface world and start again. But for Christians, the rapture would have them go to the sky. They'd go to heaven, which is typically depicted as bright and pure. But in some twist of irony, the city of Rapture is underneath the surface and is filled with guns, gambling, sex, and so on and so forth. It's a very dark and impure environment. This is done on purpose to show just how backwards Ryan's thinking is about himself and his city. He claims that there are no gods or kings, but he acts like one all the same. The city of Rapture started with a bright future and good ideas. Like said before, it would be a getaway from the surface world along with its restrictions. People could pursue their wildest fantasies and make them a reality. But once plasmids were introduced, citizens began killing each other over petty things because they could. They thought that they were gods too. And while plasmids may not be the only thing that ruined Rapture, it certainly was the first major issue and ultimately the demise of Rapture. And just as one further point to connect Andrew Ryan with being a self-proclaimed god, there's Adam. Adam is a type of currency that is used to buy plasmids or upgrade your character in the game. In Christianity, Adam was the name of the first man and signified the start of mankind. So in a way, this is marking the beginning of a new type of man. One who can shoot lightning from his fingertips. And of course, there's Eve Hypo. Eve Hypos are what you use to refill your ability to use plasmids. Eve was the first woman created and therefore marked the start of womankind. These are just small examples, but the names of these things were deliberately chosen. In the first BioShock, you play as Jack. Jack is just some guy who was unlucky enough to have his plane crash in the middle of the ocean, where he would eventually find his way into Rapture. Later, you find that he already had ties to the underwater city, but that's irrelevant right now. Even the name Jack is ordinary. It's a pretty standard male name and one that's been around for a long time. But this name for the main character was chosen on purpose, because you're always being a jackass and ruining Andrew Ryan's plans. I'm just kidding. It's just to make you a regular guy. An interesting decision when characters and items are deliberately named based off of something significant. But back to Andrew Ryan. Andrew Ryan is a practical man. If he wants something, he goes and gets it. He does not believe in some spiritual being helping him along the way. In his mind, he does all the heavy lifting, and he rewards himself for it. But he so blatantly becomes what he claims isn't real. Andrew Ryan may have built Rapture to help mankind progress in some way, but over time, he became lustful and eventually took a position of power. Throughout the entire game, Andrew Ryan will mock you. He'll call you a parasite, and he'll also have traps waiting for you. But as you get closer to his penthouse, he becomes more human. He becomes more human because he's scared. He realizes that you, someone who didn't mean much, finally made it up to him, the big bad wolf. And during this confrontation, he poses you with a thought.
The assassin has overcome my final defense, and now he's come to murder me. In the end, what separates a man from a slave? Money? Power? No. A man chooses. A slave obeys. You think you have memories. A farm. A family. An airplane. A crash. And then this place. Was there really a family? Did that airplane crash? Or was it hijacked? Forced down. Forced down by something less than a man, something bred to sleepwalk through life until they are activated by a simple phrase spoken by their kindly master. Was a man sent to kill, or a slave? A man chooses. A slave obeys. Come in. A man chooses. A slave obeys. Kill! Juices! A slave obeys! Obey!
Are you thinking for yourself, or are you trying to kill Ryan because someone else is telling you to? You later find out that Andrew Ryan isn't the biggest baddie in BioShock, but I certainly find him to be the most interesting. Ultimately, in the end, Andrew Ryan's self-proclamation was his downfall. Perhaps he wasn't a god after all. If BioShock is a game you've never played, I highly recommend it. Even though I kinda spoiled some huge story parts here, I think it's a game that most players should experience. Ken Levine and the team that worked on it really knew what they were doing. And while the first BioShock is still my favorite because of its gameplay, story, and thought-provoking content, the others are worthwhile as well. But I do have a confession. BioShock Infinite is my least favorite of the trilogy. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more like it, there's a playlist on screen now that leads to other videos similar to this one. Check them out if you'd like. And thank you for watching. This video was a lot of fun to make because I love BioShock so much. It's been the wallpaper of my computer for quite some time now. The game is seriously fantastic. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one.